I was once asked, do I spit or swallow? And that made me wonder if it's possible to beat Baldur's Gate 3 with Donald Trump. The rules are simple. We must do whatever Donald Trump would do in any given situation that won't get this video demonetized. But first, why don't you subscribe so I can get myself a mortgage? Baldur's Gate 3 starts on the 11th of September on a flying machine, where I attempt to reconstruct Trump in Baldur's Gate 3's engine. This was much harder than I thought it would be, as it is physically impossible to make a character in this game that is hideous. I also decided to make him a bard so he can convince anyone that no one else can boulder a gate as much as he can. We also gave him a flute because I've heard he's excellent at blowing. With our Donald Trump created, we get infected with worms and start the game aboard the nautiloid, which is heading right for the Twin Towers. We had to escape this ship, and on our way through the nautiloid we collected some brain and went to meet our first companion, Lae'zel, who introduces us to Baldur's Gate 3's combat system. But instead of partaking, Mr. Trump decided to start blowing mid-battle. Upon running through the rest of the nautiloid, we free Shart and run to the controls of the ship before Margaret Thatcher herself turned up to take the ship down. Luckily, we crash land on a beach in Faerun where we once again run into Shart, who decides to join us on our rampage through the lands. But first, we need to rid ourselves of worms, because as we all know, the best Worms game is Worms Ultimate Mayhem. As we ventured onwards, Trump bumped into someone. This man reminded him of his former lover, and as Trump entered his loving embrace, something stirred inside of him. He felt things for this man that he hadn't felt in a long time, but he couldn't tell him, since this would be one step too far for his supporters and he would forever be ostracised. Trump had to bury his feelings deep down and prove to his followers just how powerful he truly is. But for now, Bill Clinton has joined the party and we find a floating hand in a wall. Being the decrepit bag of meat and fluid that he is, Trump hadn't received a handy in many years and he wanted it. So naturally, he decided to eat the thing and carry it round with him to remind himself that he once had a handy. Venturing further into the forest, we find Lae'zel once again, and Trump manages to free her by convincing her captors that Trump is in fact the best boulder of all time. He then informs them about his doctor diagnosing him with boulder syndrome. What this syndrome does is it eventually makes you go bald, and in fear of catching it, Lae'zel's captors ran off so we can finally free her and add her to our party. With a full party and not a single lead on how to rid ourselves of these worms, we run into a group of nut goblins raiding the Emerald Grove. But with Trump being the spineless coward that he is, he ran off to let all of his companions do the work for him, before poisoning a man just for the hell of it and levelling up from all of his companions' hard work, just like in real life. Now that Trump was out of any immediate danger, it was time to go hide the Trump files, but all he found was the dog Scratch, who ended up following us to camp. Nearby there was the Blighted village, which we also managed to talk our way into, and upon exploring the Blighted village, Trump decides he's gone too long without another controversy, and he sees a gnome spinning on a windmill. So with hopes that this would garner more positive media attention from Fox News, Trump releases the gnome mid-windmill spin, sending him up into space with the idea that the media will say Trump personally deported the gnome. With more media attention attained, Trump and his companions ventured forward to the nearby Nut Goblin camp, where Trump smeared dog shit on his face in order to keep his healthy orange glow. At this time, a disembodied voice appeared from the sky telling us about the champions of the United States of America, but we couldn't have these frauds taking Donnie's media attention from him. We needed another scandal, a scandal so massive that it would make the Trump files seem insignificant in comparison, but for now, that will just have to wait. We go further into the Goblin camp where we meet a bard who we decide to take on our adventures to act as a makeshift journalist, before running into a drow who for some reason wants to know where the Emerald Grove is. Seeing a potential ally in our upcoming trade war, we decided to partner with the drow and give up the location of every single refugee in the Grove. With the Grove's doomsday clock ticking, we decided now would be an excellent time to try and go find a healer before they all get murdered. Unfortunately, when we return to the Grove and meet their healer, we discover that she has immense foresight and she sees the screams of Baldur's Gate. Knowing she had to do something about it, she stuck her poison pointy thing into Donald's hole, which will slowly kill him. Filled with rage and 7 types of lice, Donald decided to smite her down in order to get the antidote before fully committing to the plan of killing every single person in the grove. But before we do that, we need to prepare by catching the 19 hours of sleep this president needs. However, in the middle of the night, we catch Lae'zel attempting to do the world a favour, but before she could, she got convinced by Trump's silver tongue and he slit her throat before she could even say "Make America Great Again." With this death now on Trump's mind, he yearned for more war crimes, so much so that in his dreams he was visited by Mr. War Crime himself, who informs the president that in order to carry out his evil, dastardly plans, Trump needs to give him $17 billion in taxpayer money, which Trump of course agrees to. Upon waking up from that magnificent dream, Trump realised he had to bring another companion along for the ride, so we begrudgingly bring Will along with us. On the plus side, Will quickly redeems himself in Trump's eyes since he recommends us going to kill someone who is meant to be a good person. So naturally we head right there and game enter before going back to the Emerald Grove and finally getting the raid underway by opening the gate. Will did not seem too happy about this even after I helped him slaughter an innocent. So unfortunately, in the name of the presidency, we had to sentence Will to death and steal his clothes. Zevlor then soon followed before we went to destroy all the innocents left in the grove. This was a momentous occasion, because that evening it meant for the first time in history, a woman actually wanted to sleep with Donald Trump. But Trump was deluding himself. Something was missing. It just wasn't as good as his former lover Bill Clinton, and he wanted to relive it. But knowing his followers would hate him forever, he continued to hide his true feelings. After the most subpar shagging in her life, Minthara tells Trump to head on to Moonrise Towers, where we can continue to ascend her army's ranks. But first, we actually had to get there through a mountainous pass. On our way up, we have another long rest, and we kill a random bard who appeared in our camp since they wanted to steal our Watsits. Astarion also finally comes clean about the fact that he is Bill Clinton, and that he is also a vampire. Trump was overwhelmed with emotions, but for old time's sake, he let Bill do some sucking of his blood right next to the blood-filled corpse. But if I remember correctly, it was Trump that used to do the sucking. As we woke up in camp, Trump's companions were concerned about the beautifully displayed corpse on the floor, so he owned up to his misdeeds and told them it's okay, because the bard was in fact a communist. They seemed content with this explanation, so for now, we're able to continue as normal. As a reward for a job well done, the Bard Volvo took out Trump's eye and gave him a new one, so we continue along the mountain path where we encounter a Gith hideout. There was a little something that Trump needed from the Gith, so he used his magic handy to open their front door before heading straight to their worms machine. After succeeding in a few skill checks, Trump was now able to use his illithid powers as a bonus action. And now that he was fully juiced up on worms, we could finally head on to Moonrise. But before we headed off, Trump encountered his longtime assistant in the middle of camp. It was JD Vance, who told Trump to embrace who he truly was. This gave Trump a lot to think about, especially about his sexuality. But while he was deep in thought, we were ambushed in combat where Trump and Shart were brutally struck down and Bill Clinton ran off to the Shadowlands to get some help. But the love between Trump and Bill was too strong, and with the power of love, Trump was revived and by Bill's side once again as they entered the Shadowlands, and for some reason, Shart was alive and well too. Now all that was left was to make it to Moonrise, but if we run out of time, we will get impeached once again. But I guess we'll find out in the next episode of Only Balls, since YouTube values consistent uploads and I like having a consistent work schedule. So I'll see you soon.